Welcome everyone to Qdabra's weekly webinar. This is Patrick and I'm the Chief Project Manager here. It's great to see so many people here on your busy Thursday. I appreciate your time. We have a short 25-minute webinar today talking about the latest release of FormsDesigner, which is half of the Qdabra Forms piece that we've built to help customers migrate off of InfoPath. We've spent the last couple of years focusing on FormsDesigner and before that on Forms Viewer. We still make updates to Forms Viewer 2 or 3 times a year, but our main focus these days is trying to finish those missing features in FormsDesigner so that you can move off of InfoPath Designer. And Jimmy Risch is here with me today, and he's going to show you 5 of the latest and greatest things that we have just released. In fact, I hope you haven't gotten tired of pumpkins. I know this is a little bit past the season of Halloween, but we still have this wonderful, beautiful slide deck that Mel created, so we're going to use it. Here's the quick poll to start us off with. Which version of Qdabra Forms are you using? There's 4 different options. Qdabra Online supports both public and private instance. We have customers on both, obviously. We have SharePoint on-prem customers with private instances, and we even have customers that don't have SharePoint that are using it. So this is just a quick question. It looks like most of you are using the online. Actually, I don't know how many people have voted yet. It looks like about just 1 or 2 of you have. So for those who have voted, you're using online with private instance. That's great. I'm going to stop the poll and we'll move on. And actually, there was one person that responded with the public instance too. So great to have you here as well. And once again, thanks for your time today. So today we're really talking about, we got 4 or actually 4 quick demos. We'll probably be out of here in about 25 minutes. And we're going to show you how you can add people pickers to your forms, how to repoint your forms to new libraries. In the case where form libraries may not stop, you may not be able to write data to form libraries after July 2026. We're not sure. Microsoft has said they'll continue supporting the data there, but they're unclear about whether you can actually write forms there. So we have a backup option there. We talked about this in our webinar last week as well. Jimmy's going to show how to promote properties, complex properties, people pickers with multiple fields, multiple people for notification. And then we'll show how to use our DBXL XTP, which is a new addition to FormsDesigner to show you how to move your data off of SharePoint completely into your SQL database. This is a really cool feature because it streamlines that process dramatically. And then Jimmy's also got some usability improvements he's going to show. So first up, if you got questions, please put your questions in the question area. We're going to start talking about people pickers. Why? Well, you need to be able to look up people in SharePoint, valid people that are in your Active Directory. So we've got a control for that. And there's a couple tips here that Jim's going to go over. I'm going to switch to you, Mr. Risch. Are you ready? Do you have audio?
Yep. Yes, I am ready. Thank you.
Great.
Okay, so hello everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar. So the first thing I'm going to be showing you is FormsDesigner's new ability to add and modify people pickers. So in order to facilitate the use of people pickers, we've actually added two major features. One is the ability to add a person field to a form. So let's start with that. Here we're looking at an expense report form, and we've got a manager name here. Right now that manager name is a text field, it's a text box, but let's say we wanted to make that a little more robust and allow people to select a person instead. So for that we use a people picker. So the first thing we want to do is add a field to hold that. So we come down here to add field and click the plus sign. We'll give it a name. We'll call it manager person since the name manager is already taken. And for data type, this is important. We're going to select person or group. And note that I've chosen to add a field. We're calling these fields, even though technically they consist of a few different things. You'll see when I click add, this actually adds a whole hierarchy of one group containing a repeating group and then 3 fields. We decided to refer to this whole bunch as a field since it's actually something that's bound to a control and it holds values. So just if you're looking for it, look under the add field. Now, the next thing we want to do is add a control for that. So we come down here to person and group picture. Just adding this the same way we would add any other control in FormsDesigner. And when you're binding a person or group picker, you can either choose the parent of the repeating person group or the person group itself. Either way, you'll get the same result. So I'm just gonna pick this one, click done. There's our people picker. Let's have a look at that. Make sure to save your changes before you preview. All right, so now we can see here, this form has a bit of custom CSS that's sort of stretching the people picker across the available area. We provide all sorts of custom CSS for doing that sort of thing, making things look nice. And we can open up this dialog and search for a person. And just if you're familiar with people pickers, what that's going to do is actually populate this display name and account ID field when you pick someone. Now we also, another thing that people pickers can do is allow you to select multiple people. So let's have a look at that. Let's add a row to this table. And let's say we wanted to notify a bunch of people about this expense report. So I'm gonna call this notify people, change the font size. Okay. And just the same way, we're gonna add field. We'll call this notify people. Data type is person or group, add. And then add the field, add the control, same way. Just pick that, done, simple. Okay, and you can see that when I click on the control, I get a couple of options over here. This checkbox means that I can pick multiple people in a single people picker. As you can see, this group here is repeating, so it can hold multiple values, multiple sets of values, you might want to say. You also have the option of limiting the search to just people or to people in groups, in case you wanted to reference some kind of group. I'll pick the second option just so we can have a look at what that looks like. So I'm going to save and preview again. Okay, and what we can see here is this gives us a slightly different experience. The dialog looks similar to start off, but you can see that if I search for someone, I get a list of available values now instead of a drop down, so I can select multiple values and then copy them down to the list of selected users. I can go and search again for another person, add them to the list. And when I'm all done picking my people, I click OK, and you can see they're added here. I can add more if I want. I can search for a group, add the core group. And as this dialog allows me to add things to the list. So I'm just adding that core. If I want to remove anything, I can just click the X here, and I'm all done. And just as with the other people picker, that is going to automatically populate these fields here, and you'll have nice, automatically validated values in your form. And that's it for people pickers.
Great, thanks, Jimmy. I just want to, I think what you should do is we're talking about these 5 different things you've done in the most recent release today, but it might also be useful at the end, or maybe next, what you're sharing next, to actually go through the release notes and give some people context of how many releases we've had of FormsDesigner. I think we've had 3 this year. And so we've, just to give people kind of a historical background, we should have probably put a slide up front on that. Okay, so the second feature, actually, there's going to be 2 features here I'll go through real quick, and Jimmy's going to demo these and talk more in detail. But essentially, the ability to move a form from one library to another. Well, why would you want to do that? If your form libraries, like we suggested, they might stop working in 2026. Microsoft might decide that you're not going to be able to write new XML form. They haven't actually been clear. Their blog post that we covered in the last webinar last week was unclear about exactly what would continue and what would not work. But they said that people could still open forms from the libraries, but they weren't clear about writing. So Jim will try to do that. The other reason why you might want to do this is if you're moving a form from one environment to another, this is really key. And then of course you've got promoted properties that are part of this. So Jimmy's going to show all of that, and I'm going to switch back to Jimmy.
Okay. All right, so as Patrick said, before we go any further, let's have a look at the release notes. And if you're looking for the release notes version history for FormsDesigner, you can just pick About FormsDesigner from the menu here, then click Version History. You can see it's underlined. And this will give you a list of everything, all the features and bug fixes we've done over time. You can see it goes all the way back to our first release in 2021. And we had a slightly largest release in September. Most of the stuff we're demoing is from there. We had a small refresh last week, actually, with a few very small additions and bug fixes.
Jimmy, I know that people are often talking about Forms 02. Can you just go to the Forms 0 and show the history for that too, just to give people some context? Because I mean, FormsDesigner is a new thing that we're going to last 2.5 years or so, try to replace InfoPath Designer. But our first effort was to replace InfoPath Filler and InfoPath Forms Online, which is InfoPath Form Services. And so that was the first 5 years or 6 years of our effort here. We are the only company out there that has the backward compatibility to InfoPath, but we're also providing a lot of new functionality. Sorry, yeah, go ahead, Jimmy. I'm going to quickly reply. Brock, thanks for the question. So you're going to click on that. Let me just read Brock's question here. Love the people picker feature. Is there a control where you can pick from a list and also multiple lists from a list? Is there a control where you can pick from a list? That's a great idea. I would recommend just having like a drop down for that and not using obviously you'd still need to populate the people pickers. Maybe I'll throw that question to you, Jimmy, from Brock. He's asking, is there a control where you can pick from a list and also multiple items from a list?
Just in general, just selecting values. There is a control called a list box, and there's a multi-selection list box. FormsViewer supports both of those. FormsDesigner doesn't have support for adding those yet, but we will be adding that eventually. So I presume that's what he's asking about.
Yeah, I mean, we've done webinars in the past, Brock, on how to fix up people's information. Like if you're going to look them up from a list, you need all of that information, the account ID, well, mainly the account ID. So you'd have to have that in the list. And a lot of times the way SharePoint encodes it is we'll see this in probably the next demo, but it has actually some markup that it adds to the email name to identify it as a SharePoint person object or group object. You'd have to add that to it to make it SharePoint recognize it. So there's a little bit of fix up, but yeah, we can definitely help with that. Sorry for the long-winded reply. Jimmy.
Okay, all right, so if you want to look at the list of FormsViewer changes we made, the place to look is down here on the FormsViewer start page under release notes. And just like I showed in FormsDesigner, you can see the full version history. We actually started maintaining this list around 2019. If you want to look any farther back, you can see that it's posted on our website. But this has all the information since then, all the new features and sort of some guidance about how to use them. Okay, and you can see we had a couple of FormsViewer features in the last 2 months. Okay, so now we are talking about migrating to a new list. So as Patrick mentioned, there is a possibility that at some point you might need to migrate your data from a form library to a document library. Another place where this feature is very useful is if you're migrating from one SharePoint instance to another, such as SharePoint on-prem to SharePoint online. If you want to repoint your form without going through the whole publishing process with InfoPath, can be a bit troublesome. This is a lot easier. So this form, I'm actually opening it up from this November 2nd webinar site, but the form itself is published to a 2020, the October 26th site. You can see I've got a library there in that site. It's got a few documents. But let's say I want to just, use it in this new site. So what I do for that is I just come down here to this publishing tab, go to publish location, and click this button here. And this will auto-populate with the current values. If I wanted to stay within the site, I can just select a different library. But in my case, I want to repoint it to a different site, so I'll just add that URL, click Query Libraries. And by default, it's going to look for a library that has the same name as the one it was already pointing to. As you can see here, it didn't find one with that name in the new site, and it's explaining that to me. But I can pick one. I've prepared a brand new empty expense reports document library in this new site, so I'm just going to pick that. Click Apply Changes. And this gives me some guidance reminding me that I need to save my template when I'm ready to try out my changes, and then I can publish promoted properties. So we can see here, if we go over to promoted properties, that the form already has a few. It's got 3. So if I want to publish that out to this new library, all I've got to do is click Publish, confirm this. And this is going to do an assessment of whether the columns are already in the target library. It's detected that all 3 of them are going to be new. So I'm going to go ahead and click Publish. All right, and then it gives me a report of what it did, saying that it added these 3 columns. So I can come over here, look at the columns in this list, library that is, and we've got report date, purpose, and employee name. So very easily we created those promoted properties. Now, of course, we also support the ability to add new properties and modify existing ones. So let's go ahead and do that. So I've got these new person fields that I've added. So let's try those out. I want to add my manager field. Let's see, manager. So for that, I'd like to have a column just with the display name of the manager. So I'm going to pick this display name. Okay, I've got to give it a name, so I'll go with manager name. And here I'm getting this aggregation dropdown because, as I've mentioned, this person group is repeating. So it's detecting that there might be multiple fields that have this path. So I've got to tell it what it's supposed to do with multiple values. And in this case, it's in practice, it's going to be a single value. So I'm going to go ahead and use the first value. Okay, let's add that one more person field. That one was to notify people. So for this one, let's go ahead and use the account ID. You can imagine maybe you want to use this in a workflow or a flow or something of that nature, where you want to put all of the IDs out to a column. So I'll call this notify people. And so in this case, I want all the values. So the way to get all of those is to use merge, which will give me a space delimited list of all the values. And just to look at how this feature supports modifying existing columns, I can come in here and change the name to expense purpose. All right, so let's go ahead and publish those out. All right, so it's going to do the assessment. It can see that I have changed the title of this column, so it's going to apply that change. It's also detected that there are 2 new columns that need to be published out and 2 that are going to remain unchanged. So I'm going to publish that. All right, and here we can see the report saying that the one column was updated and the two new ones were added. And you can see over here, I can just refresh this page and see that already my column has been renamed like it should have been. And I can add those two more columns to the view. So manager name and notify people. There we go. Okay, so the library is currently empty. So let's actually see the promoted properties in action. So the publishing process automatically saves my changes out to FormsViewer. That's to ensure that the form remains consistent with what's actually been published out, so I don't close it and lose what I had added. So all I need to do is just open it right up.
You need to add the new submit location, right?
Ah, good point. Okay, right. So I did repoint the publishing location, but the submit connection is still pointing to the previous location. So I can fix that up very quickly. Just come over here to data connections, pick the new site, pick the new library. There's a very similar experience to the changing the publish location, apply changes. And this is something that requires me to manually save. So I'm going to save that. Okay, you just come over here and refresh. All right, report date.
Well, I really like the new UI you have for the promote properties that actually validates that actually did promote them, unlike InfoPath Designer. That's really nice.
Yeah, it gives a lot more visibility into what it's actually doing. I think it's quite a bit of an improvement over the previous experience. All right, so I filled out my form, gonna submit it. It's submitted. Okay, let's come back over here, refresh. We can see all my nicely populated promoted properties. You can see that these are holding the values I specified. In the future, we might add some support for actually making, using person columns for these promoted properties. Currently, they're just text. That's primarily to maintain backward compatibility with InfoPath for the time being, but eventually we might add that as a brand new feature.
Nice.
So that's that for promoted properties.
Awesome. Okay, we're moving right along, and we've got two more things to show you, and these are really nifty features that we've added. Jimmy's added to FormsDesigner, and the first feature is taking your form and scaling it beyond SharePoint storage limitations. We talked a little bit about this in last week's webinar, and we're going to actually be presenting a whole day on training at the end of November on how to move your data from SharePoint into SQL. We have this web service that we've had. It was our first accelerator we built back in 2005, and it allows you to essentially store all your data in SQL, and you can still use SharePoint, of course, as your dashboard, as your workflow engine, whatever. You can also use DBXL for lots of features. In fact, we even include workflow in DBXL now. What Jimmy will show is how easy it is to essentially move your form so that it's submitting to a SQL database using this new DBXL XTP. Now, XTP stands for XML template part, so it's a reusable control that you can add to your forms, so you can reuse it from one form to another. And with that, Jimmy, I think I'm going to switch to your screen again. Okay.
All right, so we're going to stick within this same form for this demo. So currently, as you can see, this form submits to SharePoint. If we come over here to this submit button, we can see that it has a SharePoint submit action. But let's say we wanted to submit to DBXL instead. And just before I do this, I'll mention that this is, of course, very useful for that type of scenario. But also, if you're just making a brand new form, you want to add some DBXL submit functionality off the bat, it's great for that. Also, for migrating from older versions of DBXL to a newer version, it includes some features that help with that as well. So basically 3 different areas where this thing is really useful. So to add my XTP, I've got this drop down right up here. I'm going to pick DBXL data connections and click the plus icon. Okay, it's been added. And that brings up a little instruction page explaining how to set it up. Usually these XTPs require a bit of fix up just to get everything sort of linked up, but we've made this process very streamlined, very simple, such that you can do it in a matter of minutes. Okay, so we'll just go through this. And before I go through the steps, let's talk very briefly about environment variables. Now, this is a new feature we added to FormsViewer a little while back that allows you to store values on a page, on a management page, so that you can just query them into your form using a qrules command. The benefit of that is that you have these values in one place. They're not scattered across different templates, and they'll give you a maintenance issue having to manage them in all that different places. And we've actually got some special functionality for DBXL environment variables. So you can see that if you specify this DBXL URL and DBXL user key environment variables, let's just look at that page. Then this XTP has some functionality that's specific to loading those values in and using those to point the form's data connections at the right DBXL instance and use the right API key. Okay, so this is the page. In order to get to there, the instructions explain this, I believe. But yeah, you just come to the main page, click Manage Environment Variables. You have to be an admin to do this. Okay. All right, so that's already taken care of. That's something you usually only need to do once. So then we get to the specifics of configuring this XTP for one form. So the first thing, we'll just go through the steps, is to add qrules to our form. As you can see here, this form does not have qrules yet. There's no Qdabra rules data source. So I'm just going to come down here, click Add It. There we go, has qrules. Okay. Step 2, add the XTP to your form. We've just done that. You might be reading the instruction page before you do that, but we've already done it. So step 3. Okay, add logic to trigger the onload field. So the XTP has a field called onload that does some logic when the form loads in order to get it ready to do all its magic. So it explains what to do here. I need to go to the finish loading field in Qdabra rules. So there we go. Going to add a rule. So we'll call this XTP load. It's just going to set a field's value. You might be familiar with this technique where we just trigger some logic by setting a value to a field. And by convention, typically use go. So there we go, go. All right, that is step 3, all done. Step 4 is qrules related again. Now what we're doing here is we're sort of hooking the XTP into qrules. Since the XTP doesn't come with qrules, qrules is separate, it can't directly interact with it. It can only, the built-in functionality that's added to the form when you click this button, it can only interact with stuff within the XTP. So we've just got to sort of hook it into qrules. So that's very simple. We come here to temp command, click rules, and this is the one we want to modify. So we've got two rule actions that we're going to modify. This one is currently setting a value to stop. Instead of that, we're going to have it set the QRules command field, so that this is sort of sort of a catapult for commands, where when the XTP wants to run some logic, it sets the value to this field, that transfers the value over to QRules, and then it gets the result back. So it completes the loop. So this next one, we just come in here, instead of setting the destination for this one, we're setting the value is going to be this rules field from QRules, the result field rather. Okay. Now there we've got result. Okay, that is step 4. Step 5 this is just where we're setting up our submit values, what we want it to use when it's submitting. So we come in here, we want to go to the submit field. So there we go. And we want to go to the set values for DBXL submit, which is right here. Okay, so we need to specify which doc type it's going to submit to. I've prepared a doc type for this. It's this one. So this is the name I'm going to use. Here we go. And remember, there's some text reminding you this here, but when you want to use a static text value, put it in quotes. Okay, so there's my doc type name. And we don't have to specify all of these other ones, but let's just specify one of them. For name, I'll go ahead and use the employee name field. So that's going to come from main. Employee name, okay. All right, I'll skip the other two, but so that's the end of step 5. Step 6 is to modify any existing logic so that it triggers the submit field. So I've got a button here, the submit button, that, I want to close this. So I just come right here, click that. Okay, I've got a button that's currently submitting to SharePoint. Let's say I want it to submit to both for the time being. So just click my button, come in here. No, this one. Oh, okay. Okay, there we go. Something a bit strange happened there. Okay, so I want to submit to DBXL. So per the instructions, all I need to do here, let's submit to DBXL first, is trigger that submit field. So I'm going to set a field's value, XTP logic, actions, submit, and I'm going to set that to go just like that other one. Okay, let's bring those instructions back up. You can use this icon here to bring the instructions back up. Also true if you've closed the form and reopened it, you can just bring up the instructions for any XTP that you want by clicking this. Okay. All right, but for now we want to move on. So if your form has non-user key QueryDB connections, there's some stuff you can do here. It doesn't. This is basically for forms that are migrating from an older version of DBXL to Forms UI. This allows you to switch them from not using API keys to using API keys. But in our case, we can skip this. You can also add the execution history to your form to see what QRules is doing, which can help with some troubleshooting any issues that come up. And lastly, it just tells me to close these instructions. All right, so you can see it took a bit longer because I was explaining the whole way, but I think if I were doing this just following the steps, it'd probably take about 3 minutes.
Wow, so with just 7 or 8 or 3 minutes, you can add all that functionality to a form. And now, can you show us the before and after, before you actually open it up and submit? Can you show what's in the database, and then after you submit it, and show the database tables populating?
I don't have this shredding out to any database tables. It's just submitting. Okay. It's going to submit to a doc type.
Yeah, but I think that would be fine. Just show the new document up there.
Okay, yeah, so I've created a document type that I'm going to submit to. It doesn't have any documents yet. And I'm going to save out my changes. This time here is a useful way to check whether you've saved recently. All right, open it up. Okay.
There's a lot of functionality that these XML template parts can include in your form with very little effort. In this case, we've got data connections, we've got data sources, rules, and even visual components can be added to your forms. So it's quite a valuable way to upgrade your forms, and then you can include instructions. Obviously, we're going to be adding many more XTPs in the months and years to come. We only have 2 right now. We've demoed probably about 20 in webinars past. All of those will be getting added to FormsDesigner soon.
Yep. All right, so I'm ready to submit. I'll go ahead and click submit. All right, now we can come over to the admin tool and refresh the list of documents. There it is. All right, so you can see that in just that short span of time, I was able to add DBXL submit functionality to my form quite effortlessly. But that's not all. One other thing that this XTP provides is the ability to load existing documents into the form. So I'm just going to open up a blank form. And basically the way this works is that if the URL contains a doc ID parameter with a doc ID value, it is going to query that document from DBXL and load it into the form. So I'll just take a look at that. There we go.
That's fast.
Of course, yeah. Of course, I did that by manually editing the URL, but in practice, you would have a dashboard or something of that nature that builds up those URLs for you. And that, you just get that feature automatically.
And we'll be showing a dashboard that Hillary created for training at the end of this month. It's pretty easy to create these dashboards. We also have a central flows solution that gives you a dashboard out of the box that's built on top of DBXL if you want to add workflows to your form. So we'll be talking. I know a couple of you on the call are actually getting central flows installed this month, so thanks for being here. Okay, so let's just quickly try to close out. We've got one more, or I think we have 2 more demos to go. I want to thank you for your patience on this call. I'm going to quickly just switch back to the slides just to remind us of what that last demo or 2 was, and see if I can. Okay, so we're talking about usability improvements. I think this is the last one, Jimmy. So do you want to talk to this, and then I guess just maybe talk to this slide real quick, and then I'll switch to this presenter.
Yeah, so in this version, we added a couple of very simple improvements. These are things that came out of actually using the app and noticing, oh, it would be nice if it did this. Things that just make your day slightly easier. So yeah, why don't we just switch over that and I can show what that looks like. All right, so just things like this, like if you add a new rule, it auto highlights the rule name, so you can just start typing what you want to do. Previously, previously it wasn't doing that. You had to do the extra click and then start typing. Now, not only is it focused, but it's also highlighted, so you can just start typing on top of it. Similarly, here in anything that uses an XPath editor box, it's also going to auto place the cursor, so you can just start typing. And also, you can confirm this box now by hitting the Enter key. And of course, if there's a validation error, it won't allow you to close it. It'll tell you validation. So I think we've covered all the angles as far as that goes. So just slightly more convenient. We're going to continue taking user feedback, using our own findings from using the app and just continue doing things like that. Yeah, so that's basically that.
Awesome. Okay, just to finish finalizing the webinar, thank you again for being here today. And that was usability features. Do you have any questions for us? I know we've had a couple questions from, well, one from Brock earlier. We are going to be doing training at the end of this month. I mentioned that twice already. Here's a link. You'll get, we've got 4 questions in the survey, and then we'll send you the presentation. The link to the class is also on our webpage, so you can go to Qdabra.com education, and then you can click on underneath education, there's classes, and you can register by clicking on this link. We are limiting the class to 15 people because we're actually doing a promotion to increase engagement. Basically, we're giving people a $1,000 support credit if they finish the labs in the 4-day training. The training is just 3 hours a day, 4 days, and the labs are all pretty simple. We'd love to have you in the class, but it is capped at 15, and I think we've got 5 people registered, maybe 6 now, so we still have some time. So we'd love to see you there. Hope you can make it. And with that, I think that's it. I want to thank Jimmy for his awesome presentation again today, his demos, and all the great work he's doing on FormsDesigner. He's the reason why we're able to push these features forward, and we've committed to getting total feature complete. Well, 99% of all the features by in the next couple of years. We're much further along than we were a year ago. Jimmy's been working really hard, and I think you guys can see that with all the webinars we've been doing. If you do have a special request, there is a question in the survey. You can tell us what feature that's missing you really want. I mean, right now it's kind of hard to think of the main missing features, but we are implementing a slew of them for the next release, which is January-ish timeframe. It might be early February, late January. And one example is SOAP web services, being able to configure those kinds of data connections were not supported previously. And DBXL is a SOAP web service, so if you need to connect to DBXL, you can just add the XTP. But if you had another SOAP web service you want to configure it, we'll be launching that feature early next year. And then we have a bunch of other things that Jimmy's working on that we'll be talking about probably in February timeframe. We'll have another webinar on this. If you want to get experience with FormsDesigner, the latest and greatest version, obviously you've got it. If you've got the online version of Qdabra Forms, it's there. You can actually just go in and click design and take a look. If you want to get hands-on lab experience with us standing by, go and register for the training at the end of this month, and we look forward to seeing you there. And thanks again for your support and for your patience. And we have one question from Richard. When do you think the link to this recording will be out? Yeah, I saw, Richard, that you jumped on a little bit later. I will actually upload the link after this call, and then I'm guessing that Jenny or Kauda will be able to post the link to YouTube within the day. So hopefully by the end of the day, and I'll tell them that you're waiting for it. Great, thanks for being here, and thanks for being a customer, and we hope you all have a wonderful day. Thanks again. Take care. Bye, Jenny.
Thank you, everyone.